The first question is going to go in alphabetical order, as we did when we did the introductions to Mr. Peter Obi. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Nigeria has failed to meet the poverty-busting targets that it set for itself, with 133 million Nigerians, representing 63% of the populace, now officially thrown into destitution, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. How do you intend to deal with poverty and to contain what is clearly a crisis of privation, penury, and manifest destitution, which seems to be getting worse, not better? And you've got 3 minutes to answer that question.
Well, out of the 3 minutes, for me, let me start by thanking Arise and the other parties that are involved in this third series of the town hall meetings. And I thank the other presidential candidates as well for participating. This increases and makes our democracy better and shows our commitment and respect for those who want to serve. Tonight's town hall meeting issues centers on health, education, human capital, and poverty, though human capital encompasses health and education. And of course, lack of it is the direct consequence of poverty. And I believe that the issues we're discussing is the foundation of the Human Development Index, which again is measured on 3 critical areas of life expectancy, where Nigeria is 55 years, while the global average is 72.8. And of course, in human capital, the last measure that I know published by World Bank in 2018 were 152 over 157. And the poverty, you mentioned it yourself, we're 133. And cumulatively, the Human Development Index, we're 163 over 191. And this situation, like you mentioned, is unacceptable and calls for one thing: the Great Escape, as mentioned by Nobel Prize winner in 2015 in economics, Angus Deaton of Princeton. The difference between rich and poor nation is health and education. So how do you tackle this? You tackle it by investing in this critical area. And that's what I would do if I have the opportunity of serving. Invest in these critical areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Abuja studios. Dear candidates, you have 2 minutes each to answer this next question. The federal government has blamed the subnationals, that is the state government, for the state of poverty in Nigeria. Should you become the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, what will you do to reverse this trend of stifling of local government funds, which has contributed to the level of poverty and insecurity in the country? I was speaking to the candidate of the Labour Party. Mr. Peter Obi, please. Yes. Yes.
It is the state governments that are the subnationals that are causing poverty. Because if you look at what is today causing the poverty level that we have, you first have to look at the issue of security, which is federal government. Issue of physical viability and everything, which is federal government. Most of the things that are causing it today reside on the purview of federal government. And I'm going to deal with it on issue of managing local government resources. I managed it for 8 years. And what I always tell people, go and see how we managed to work with the state and local government to be able to effectively use the resources in area of education, in area of primary health care, and other development areas. And that is what we will continue. But the major cause of poverty in Nigeria is issues that reside with federal government. It is the federal government that will revise the productivity by first, if the country is properly secured, you return confidence in investors, both local and this. If you bring appropriate measures to have conducive environment, regulatory environment that investors can come in and everything. So I think it resides on federal government.
Now, representative of the Guardian newspaper, Dr. Bridget Onoche.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my question goes to the presidential candidate of Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi. Sir, you just explained how you were able to work harmoniously with the local government areas to ensure even development in the states. If elected into office as the president, how do you intend to ensure that state governors do your part so that there will be even development? I ask this because if you succeed at the federal, but states remain backward, the buck will still fall on your table. Thank you. Thank you.
And let me call on the representative of the cable, Sunday Isua.
All right.
The cable.
My name is Sunday Isua from Leadership Newspaper. My question is for all the presidential candidates. And the question is, it concerns education. Because I don't want to talk about how the government have ignored the researches that are taking place in the Nigerian universities. I want to talk about the issue of strike, where ASU, which was formed in 1978, have gone for strike action for more than 33 times. And in these 33 times, in an average, it has been there for, the strike have lasted for more than 6 months. You know, now, if you become president, I'm talking about all the presidential candidates, how are you going to address this issue of ASU strike? Are you going to privatize the universities, or are you going to adhere to the 2009 agreement, you know, that the federal government entered with ASU? Thank you.
So I have 2 questions. Okay, one question. Okay, one question is this. Before the National Assembly, there is an executive bill to institutionalize SIPs. Before we had SIPs, we had Shopee. Now, these are programs that have been designed to address poverty. If you become, you get into office, and that's everybody, what are you going to sustain this? Do you think it has addressed poverty? And if no, what will you do? What will your program be? How will you design your program? Tell us about that.
Okay.
Back to the
right. I think there are quite a series of rather confusing questions, I have to say, and that's not really entirely fair on the candidates here. So let's focus on the last question, because we haven't got to education yet. Let's focus on the last question, which had to do with poverty. And I think that question was directed at you, Peter Obi. And I think there was also another question before that, because it got a little bit, as I said, confusing, from Dr. Onoche about how you were going to deal with the states if you become president, because I mean there's a division between states and the federal government. The federal government has its powers, the states has its powers. So pick and choose which you want to answer first.
Quite frankly, for any meaningful development, any meaningful thing, the federal government must work seamlessly with the subnational. In fact, one of the things that have made us to fail in millennium development goals is that we were not able to streamline that process into our development agenda, starting from the local, subnational, and national. So for us to have any meaningful development, that is why even in the Constitution, there's what you call Economic Council, which means every month which is supposed to be the states and federal, because they're supposed to move simultaneously and seamlessly in development. And that I can assure you, I will do. I've said it that I will be at the center, ensuring that you communicate and deal with all the states. On issue of education and also, first is that tertiary education. The most critical...
I think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's a question that will come later. I think they just kind of threw it up. We want to get through with all the poverty questions, and then we'll change to education and healthcare and all the rest of it.
On the issue of the poverty one, which is SIPS and Shopee, you mentioned SIPS and Shopee before it and everything, quite frankly, to deal with the issue of poverty, I believe the government is involved a lot. The issue of dealing with poverty, the government fiscal position have to be clearly designed and spelled out, while execution should be directed. For example, if we're talking about agriculture, we don't need to start the programs running with the government. We have Bank of Agriculture. I will resuscitate the Bank of Agriculture in Kaduna and ensure that they in turn support the farmers when it comes to issue of ensuring access to funding to deal with that issue. Other agencies that are designed that will deal with the issue of ensuring either issue to do with crops, issue to do with land plantation, there's a lot you need to do. If there's no one process. Issue of dealing with, for example, issue of dealing with small, medium, micro, small businesses. All you need to do is to resuscitate. We used to have all the micro banks, community banks, and everything.
You've got about 30 seconds.
And make them to function. If you make them to function effectively, having a percentage of our lending go to this particular sector, and then physical support.
Especially in northern Nigeria. What will you do as president to reverse the growing number of out-of-school children in this country? And you've got 2 minutes to answer that question.
Well, you have to look at what we have been able to do so far in education at the federal and state level. But talking about the federal level now, our investment in education is low compared to even comparable countries. If you look at it, let me just use 2016 to date, 6 years, to 2021. Our investment, our total investment in budget in education at the federal level is about 3.6 trillion, just 3,550 billion. That's our investment for 6 years. That is not up to South African, which is second biggest economy, or about the same for 1 year. In 2020, their budget for education was 380 billion rands. If you convert these two, you will see the difference. So you need to invest more. And if you look at their own, it was about between 14 and 16%. All throughout these 6 years, our budget is not up to 10% in education. There's no way that can happen with the pool of people who have out of school. For me, Nigeria can design their budget differently. If we work hard in this country, I believe Nigeria can, if they pluck all revenues, be able to get a revenue of about 15 trillion annually. And if they are borrowing, not throwing away to subsidy and other areas and curtailing cost of governance, they borrow about maybe another 10 trillion. You need about 25 trillion budget to start with. And 10% of that should go to education and 10% to the other areas which we're going to come into. We're going to invest in education. We're going to do whatever is possible to ensure that we pull those millions of children and ensure they get basic education, which is the most important.
Okay, and that was dead on time again. Thank you very much indeed. And just to program. But let me take you to Abuja and to my colleague Adesua Omoruwan, who has some questions for the candidates. Adesua.
Thank you very much, Charles. Well, let's talk about that ASU that everyone has been eager to talk about tonight. The industrial action in the tertiary institutions in Nigeria have become almost as constant as the Should you become the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, what deliberate actions would you take to ensure that this will become a thing of the past?
Well, as governor of Anambra State, I do have a very long and, these issues with ASU. And if you look at it today, when the ASU was on strike, the last strike, Anambra State University was among the few universities that were not on strike. And they said it was because of the way I handled and what I did with them and in the past that made them to be like that. But overall, the funding of tertiary institutions in Nigeria needs to be restructured. It needs to bring a lot of mix where government will contribute. We have some deductions from private sector. Who needs these products? Who contribute? And bring issue of loans and everything. It's not something that I think federal government can continue funding the way they are funding it. What they need now is to go back to the agreement, clear the backlogs, and then design a sustainable funding mechanism, which is very easy. It's happened. We learn from what is happening in other countries of the world.
The next panel member that would be asking the candidates a question is Professor Jideofor Adibe of the Center for Democracy and Development, our major partner for this Town Hall series. Please limit your question to education and please project when asking your question. Thank you.
My question is about the crisis in the education sector. I think we tend to focus on the higher education and we tend to a crisis in the lower segment, the primary and secondary schools. It seems to me that the deterioration in our education system or the crisis is more pronounced there and the decline is proportionate to the growth of privately owned schools. And right now there's hardly any elite that sends their children to the public schools. So what you have now is that the public schools that feed the higher institutions of learning are in crisis. The quality is so low that when they feed the higher education system, the quality of the graduates themselves are also quite low. So my question is, how are you going to address the imbalance where, for example, people in nurseries, in private schools pay higher tuition than postgraduate and graduate students in public-owned universities? If you become the president, and I'm directing it to the three presidential candidates, if you become the president, how are you going to revert the decline in the public education system, especially at the lower levels?
Let me give you the opportunity, Mr. Peter B., to answer the same question.
Well, like I said at my introduction message, education is among the three measurements of HDI is most critical because, like I say, it's the driver of the other ones. And when you talk about the education, you talk about basic education. And when we say our education is in crisis today, it is that basic education. Even when you talk about out-of-school children in the north, the 20 million out-of-school children, which 60%, if you look at it, is women, which we need to deal with urgently in order to bring that sector back to them. What you need to do, apart from having increased investment, like I said, in education, is to also have increased supervision and ensuring that the resources are well utilized, working in partnership with the states and local governments. Because when you talk about out-of-school children in the north, these are children who have learned Quran. If they can learn Quran, that means they're intelligent. I will meet them at where they are learning Quran and teach them skill. With that, you'll be able to. As for what we are going to do in education, all I can tell anybody is go and see what we did with the primary school and secondary schools in Anambra State. In fact, in Anambra State, people prefer to put their children in public school rather than private school. I went to Christ, let me use my secondary school, Christ the King College. People queue up now to be able to go be admitted there.
Here is the editor for The Sun, Ihe Anacho, for that question.
My question is directed at the contestants. You talked about we've not addressed the main issue that we are facing today, which is abduction of students. Schools are no longer safe. People go to school and will not return to their homes. Teachers go to schools and will not return to their homes. How would you address this challenge? Because we've seen it is happening in the universities, it is happening in nursery schools, it is happening in secondary schools. How do you address this?
Well, the issue of security goes far beyond schools. Today we have issues with food security because our farmers cannot go to farms. The same thing goes all over. There's the issue of insecurity, what everything is to, again, see how we can review and restructure our entire security architecture, which includes increasing the number of personnel, equipping them and training them properly, having a multi-level policing on the police side, local government to state, to national level, as well as aggressively and simultaneously pulling people out of poverty. Because this poverty still have a lot to do with this. So if you don't deal with the economy and tackle it simultaneously as you're tackling security, you're going to still have the same problem. You can't have 33% unemployment in a country of over 200 million people. And you will have crisis. We just said that 1.3 million people live under poverty. You're going to have crisis. You need to start reducing that number. That is what you need to do in order to secure the country.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Peter Obi. And let's turn to the crucial issue of healthcare. We're in a country where millions have little access to affordable healthcare, and horrific stories abound about the lack of proper treatment. Meanwhile, thousands of wealthy Nigerians fly out of this country in search of medical care, with billions of dollars lost to medical tourism every year. Clearly, medical tourism is a major problem with such a large amount of foreign exchange leaving Nigeria, money that could have been converted to gains for the country if it had a vibrant healthcare system.
The first thing you need to do is the issue of primary healthcare, because that is the basics. And that, dealing with that, first, you need to increase the investment we have today in healthcare. Again, let me give you an analysis. Like I said, in education, it's very low. Our total budget in the past 6 years for health is about 2,250 billion naira. That is totally, for a country of 200 million people, that's totally unacceptable. Essentially, when you need to deal with the issue of primary health care, and especially in the north, where we now have, now we've passed India, a country of 1.4 billion in infant mortality. And the reason why we passed them is because of the situation we find ourselves in the north. Because of not investing in education and not in training, we can't get the pregnant women and everything to follow, going to hospitals, going to this. So we need to invest in primary health care, and first increase funding, invest in primary health care, invest in training the manpower. There's no reason why we should not have, especially now, nurses and midwives are needed all over the world. There's no reason why you should not have school of nursing or midwifery in every local government and be able to train the manpower that is required for this and all that. For what I can call the secondary medical care, what you need is insurance. We need to find insurance like other countries, big countries like us have done it. Example is what is happening in Indonesia. There are about 260 million. We can copy what they are doing. There's a way they structure their insurance that The rich can pay, the poor can pay, and everything cumulatively. Everybody have a health care which is covered.
Dear candidates, my question to you on health care. It is believed that Nigerian leaders do not have faith in Nigerian healthcare system, and so they abandon it. Can you pledge today to Nigerians watching from around the globe that you would be transparent, one, with your healthcare status, and pledge to Nigerians that you will prioritize the healthcare system in the country and perhaps use them? I'd like to begin with the candidate of the NNPP, because you spoke about leaders abandoning the healthcare in Nigeria. Can you pledge to Nigerians tonight that you will be transparent with your healthcare status and, of course, use Nigeria healthcare facilities? Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party, your response to my question.
Well, I believe that it is actually required that those who are aspiring to lead should be able to make available and openly their medical and health status to the public. And two, I have served as a governor. You could go ask if while serving as a governor, I resuscitated some facilities and I use them. And I still use them today. But I believe that if there's issue of referral from them to anybody beyond here, that is a referral from them that they cannot do it. Because it happens everywhere in the world. I will not say everybody must be restricted here if there is. For my own position, I use the facilities there. And I believe in them, and I can tell you they're very competent. All we need is to support it. I've said how we can use insurance to show that everybody can be cared for.
Nigerian health experts are leaving the country in droves. Many doctors, many nurses are leaving Nigeria because of the current situation. I'd like to know what specific policy will you put in place to rebrand the health system and also encourage those who have left to come back and practice in Nigeria? Also, what percentage of the budget will you dedicate to the health sector if you win the election? Thank you.
To Mr. Sonny Daniel of the Vanguard.
I put the question to the three candidates and they should answer. The healthcare system in Nigeria is extremely expensive to the point that the average Nigerian family cannot access, can't afford. And this has created a lot of problems leading to avoidable deaths, pains, and frustrations. What will you do as a president to ensure that care delivery is not only readily available, but accessible and affordable to the majority of Nigerians?
So, and Mr. Peter Obi, the same question goes to you.
Well, let me start with the issue of brain drain. I've always said it will be brain gain. If you go, there was a time the Indians, all the doctors were leaving to the Western world and everything. If you go to the UK now, everywhere is Indian doctor. But they now have a drain gain. It's all those people who left who are coming back and everything. The idea is to do massive training of doctors, nurses, and everything. Those who can leave, those who can stay here. But the most important is that you need to increase the investment in the healthcare sector. Like I said before, it is too low, it's unacceptable. You need to have at least 10% of your budget. The overall budget is already low, but if I have opportunity of explaining how I'm going to increase the budget and have at least 10%. Today, look at it, 10 years, if I just show you 6 years, our total budget is 2,247 billion. Just call it to about 2.3. So that is a 1 year budget for this size of this country. It won't even be enough. And I make sure that it's properly invested. When you come to the issue of insurance, there's a way you structure it that the government will also contribute. These are areas where you have to do subsidy, not in petroleum consumption. There's areas where government do subsidy and is in productive and development areas that are critical, like health, education, fighting poverty. These are areas you need to invest. So there needs to be a fiscal package to support this in order to support the insurance and everything, which will allow them to treat from high to low. It's been done in Indonesia, it's been done partly in India. I can show you big nations that are practicing it. We don't need to invent the wheel. We just have to learn what is being practiced somewhere and do the same thing.
So we're going to move to the next sequence, which is the issue of human capital, indeed. And Mr. Peter Obi, human capital growth. How are you going to deal with that, expand it in Nigeria?
Well, in my opening address, I did say that human capital encompasses health and education. And the consequence of its being low in Nigeria is the mass poverty you're seeing. Because the more you invest in human capital, the better your development. So human capital first, I want to show people, it's not an expense, it's an investment. Because that's what drives your development in the first place. If you invest in it, you increase per capita, which is the real measure of poverty. So for me, I have said that even if we're going to borrow money, we're going to borrow for investment. And I can show through a budget how we intend to deal with this issue in clear terms that are measurable and people can see it. So when we say we're going to put people out of poverty, we're going to state the numbers and people will see the country increase. And if I didn't have opportunity, I would have shown you using 3 countries to show you what they did with issue of human capital, how they moved their countries' HDI from low to medium to high, and how dramatically increased their per capita, which is a measure of wealth. And the same thing for Nigeria, who didn't invest, it took the other way around. And that's why you've thrown more people into poverty, where you now have more people living in multidimensional poverty than a country like India that is 7 times your size. And you have more people living in poverty. And use what they've done, and examples are bound. China, India, Vietnam have done this in something that is with effortless ease in pulling, not that it's difficult, but they've been able to show an example how you can use and methods to pull your people by investing in human capital.
Again, Charles. Dear candidate, you cannot talk about developing human capital development in the absence of an inclusive society. My question to you, how do you ensure an inclusive society? And how do you fund these developmental projects you talk about? Should you become the next president in 2023, you would be inheriting a huge budget deficit. Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party.
Thank you. Well, every country of the world owns. So first is that the incoming government is going to face huge debts, which you need to sit down and restructure in order to make it manageable, and then go ahead to restore physical viability by dealing with the issue of oil theft, the criminal subsidy we have today, deal with the issue of multiple exchange rates, like His Excellency Atiku Abubakar has mentioned, deal with that issue, deal with the issue of subsidies and areas of waivers and everything, and cut unacceptable cost of governance that we have today. By the time you deal with all this, you will be able to have a situation where you now have to have what you can call an implementable budget, because you now borrow money for investment, and by doing that, you have to bring in growth, and as you grow, you might be able to create more space to be able to borrow more, to be able to invest more, and these are how countries will grow. And with this investment in human capital, your economy will grow, more people will be put out of poverty, there will be more taxes, there will be more income, and everything, and you then start reducing your deficit and your debt.
But before we go, we're giving you 3 minutes to wrap up for us. Tie all the loose ends together and justify to Nigerians why you should be voted for as president of this country and not your opponent. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Peter Obi.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Mine is again, talk about the issues we're talking this night, because that is the issue or foundation of our country. First is to secure, unite the country, ensure that if government that is going to come into 2023 is a government of national unity that will bring in the best in terms of character and competence, irrespective of whether they support you or they don't support you, in order to save our country. Because we have an existential situation, a situation where we have this huge number of people that are living in poverty, which you need to start pulling out. Our country has not failed in the past, call it several years. And you can use other countries to show, I'll just use their country to show you how badly it was done in a matter of past few years. And that country is Bangladesh. Bangladesh, if you look at the World Bank source, in 2010, Nigeria had a per capita of $2,280. Bangladesh was $781. By 2015, Nigeria was about 2,600. Bangladesh was $1,247. Today, or 2021, Nigeria is $2,058, when Bangladesh is $2,500. Look at where we are. They were one third of our per capita in 2010. And now they have almost tripled it, and our own has gone down by about 20%. That is what we need to deal with. We need to deal with issues we discussed this night, invest in health, in education, in pulling people out of poverty by supporting small businesses, genuinely investing in productive section. Nigeria is not a productive country, and it has to be productive. If you look at our last quarter, in our last quarter, our GDP growth was 2.25%. Our money supply was about 13%. And that is, look at it, what is inflation? When your money supply is more than your growth. So you don't even have growth to be able to, for the money you're printing and throwing into the system. We need to move the country from consumption to production. Once it becomes productive, it will create labor and be able to employ people. And that's what I'm going to focus on. Thank you.